Hello everyone, my name is Olivia. I am 17 years old. And I live with my mom Julia, who is 38, and my stepdad Rick, who is 42, in Ohio. My mom had me when she was 20, and she never lets anyone forget it. She likes to tell people that I grew up too fast, because she was a young single mom trying to figure life out, and I was her little adult before I was even old enough to spell the word responsibility. For most of my childhood it was just the two of us. We were close, but that kind of closeness that happens because there is no other choice. I was the quiet kid who learned to fold laundry, cook pasta, and do the grocery list before middle school. Then Rick came into the picture when I was around 12. He was nice enough at first, kind of the calm opposite of my mom's high-strung personality. They got married when I was about 13, and that was when I started realizing that nice enough sometimes means doesn't want to rock the boat. Rick treats me fine, but his family is his priority. If his nieces or cousins need anything, my mom practically bends over backward to please them because she wants to be the perfect wife. It is not exactly malicious, but it leaves me in this awkward role of always being the one who helps, the one who fills the gaps, the one who picks up the slack when adults decide they are tired of being adults. Now, here's the thing about my mom. She has two much younger half-brothers from my grandfather's second marriage. Their names are Kyle, who is 9, and Tyler, who is 6. My grandfather remarried a woman almost 20 years younger than him, and when they had kids, my mom suddenly became a big sister in her 30s. Everyone calls them mom's little brothers. But in practice, she treats them like her sons. She dotes on them, buys them clothes, and calls them her babies. The problem is that her version of helping out also includes me doing half the work. Somewhere along the way, it turned into an unspoken rule that I was the designated babysitter for anyone under the age of 10, whether they were Rick's nieces or my mom's brothers. I work part-time at a coffee shop after school. It is not glamorous, but I like having my own money and not having to ask permission for every small thing I buy. Most of what I earn goes straight into a savings account for community college. I am proud of that. My mom, on the other hand, acts like my job is just a cute little hobby. Whenever I try to explain that my schedule is tight, she tells me I should learn to multitask. That line has become her favorite excuse whenever she wants me to do something inconvenient for her. The situation hit a new level of ridiculousness last month, when Mom and Rick decided to start renovating the living room. It was supposed to be a fun family project, but of course, I ended up being the one taping plastic to the walls and vacuuming up dust while they argued about paint colors. The chaos gave Mom what she dramatically called weekend migraines, so every Saturday she would lie on the couch with a cool towel on her forehead and complain about noise. Meanwhile, my grandfather started bringing Kyle and Tyler over for a few hours, because according to him, his wife needed a break. Those few hours always turned into the entire day, and I ended up chasing around two boys who think the entire house is a jungle gym. They scream, run, spill juice, and break things. By the end of every weekend, I feel like I have survived a natural disaster. Last weekend was supposed to be different. It was my one free day in weeks. I had been planning for it since the beginning of the month. My best friend Megan and I were finally going to see this movie we have been obsessed with since the trailer came out. We even bought matching shirts like total dorks, because it was supposed to be our little escape before school stress kicked in again. Everything was set. I woke up early, got ready, and was feeling genuinely happy for the first time in a while. Around noon, my mom barged into my room without knocking, which she always does. She had that tone in her voice that usually means trouble. She said, "You'll have to babysit Kyle and Tyler today so I can rest." I thought I heard her wrong. I looked at her and said, "Rest? You're not going anywhere beyond the couch." I did not mean it to sound rude, but the words slipped out because I was honestly shocked. She blinked at me like I had just insulted the Queen of England. Then she launched into this dramatic speech about how she needed mental peace, and how, as her daughter, it was my duty to help family without complaining. I told her that I already had plans and that Grandpa should keep his own kids for once. That was all it took for her to explode. She started yelling about how ungrateful I was, how she sacrificed everything for me, how she worked 2 jobs when I was little, and how I was turning into a selfish brat who cared only about herself. She always brings up the "I raised you alone" speech whenever she wants to guilt-trip me. But this time she took it further. She grabbed her phone, turned on the speaker, and called my grandfather right in front of me. I stood there, completely frozen, as she said, "Dad, can you believe your granddaughter refuses to help? After everything I've done for her?" My grandfather did not even hesitate. He said, "Julia, don't argue with her. I'll drop the boys off in 10 minutes. He did not ask what was going on. He did not ask why I refused. He just decided. 10 minutes later, his car pulled into our driveway. He dropped off Kyle and Tyler, handed my mom a half-eaten bag of goldfish and said, They had lunch. Before driving away like this was all normal. Mom wrapped herself in a blanket, flopped down on the couch and said, "Thank you, sweetheart," before closing her eyes. That was it. No discussion. No compromise. She just expected me to give up my one day off to babysit while she rested. I stood there shaking with anger. I had never felt so dismissed in my life. That was the moment I decided I was done being everyone's unpaid maid and built-in childcare provider. So I babysat. But not the way she expected. I told Kyle and Tyler we were going to have a learning day. I said, "Since your sister Julia needs rest, we're going to help her by being responsible." Their faces fell instantly, but I kept smiling. I made them clean up every toy they had left scattered around the house from the last time they visited. I had them fold towels, match socks, and organize the pantry. Every time they complained, I said, "We're helping your sister Julia rest. Isn't that nice?" I even made them eat the leftover vegetable soup my mom refused to throw away because food waste is expensive. By the time we were done, they were sweaty, tired, and oddly quiet. When my mom finally woke up from her nap, she looked around and saw two exhausted little boys sitting on the floor, folding paper airplanes in silence. She frowned and asked, "Why are they so tired?" I smiled as sweetly as I could and said, "Oh, we had a productive day. I thought you'd want them to learn responsibility." She looked at me for a moment, clearly unsure if she should be impressed or angry, but she said nothing. That evening my phone rang. It was Grandpa. His tone was sharp. He said Kyle and Tyler told him that babysitting with cousin Olivia was like boot camp. He said I owed them an apology for making them do chores all day. I told him I did not make them do anything I would not do myself, and if he wanted entertainment for his kids, he could hire an actual babysitter. Then he said something about respecting your elders, and before I could respond, he hung up. I thought that was the end of it, but of course it was not. The next morning, I found a note taped to the fridge in my mom's handwriting. It said, "Until you apologize to Dad, no allowance and no rides anywhere." I laughed out loud. I had not received an allowance since I was 15, and I bought my own bus pass months ago. I crumpled up the note, tossed it in the trash, and went to my shift at the coffee shop like nothing happened. When I came back that evening, Mom was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone, avoiding eye contact. I figured she would cool off eventually, but then I checked Facebook. Right there, in big dramatic text on her page, was a post that said, "Teenagers today have no respect for their parents. They forget who sacrificed for them the moment they grow up." I almost rolled my eyes out of my head. I did not comment, but someone else did. My grandfather. Underneath her post, he wrote, "Some kids don't appreciate their mothers." The irony was unreal. It has been 3 days since the babysitting fiasco, and the house feels oddly peaceful. My mom has been giving me the silent treatment, which, if I am being completely honest, feels less like punishment and more like an unexpected vacation. No guilt trips. No lectures. No passive-aggressive sighs about how hard motherhood is. Just silence. She walks past me like I am invisible, bangs the cabinet doors louder than necessary when I'm in the kitchen, and pretends to scroll through her phone every time our eyes meet. It is kind of hilarious how dramatic she can get when she is trying to make a point. I have seen toddlers throw tantrums with more subtlety. Rick has been keeping his head down too, which is probably the smartest thing he has ever done. He is one of those men who avoids confrontation at all costs, the kind who would rather mow the lawn twice in one day than get involved in a family argument. When things get tense between my mom and me, he suddenly becomes very interested in fixing things in the garage. This week he has spent so much time out there that I half expect him to move in permanently. I have been going about my normal routine: school, work, saving for college, and enjoying the rare peace of not being constantly interrupted with requests to help out. The first day after the argument, I came home from my shift at the coffee shop to find dinner already cooked. It was nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread, but the fact that I didn't have to prepare it myself was borderline miraculous. Mom had set a plate aside for me on the counter, covered in foil, like she was trying to prove she could be fine without me. I took it to my room, ate in silence, and watched my favorite show. For the first time in weeks, I actually felt relaxed. On the second day, things got slightly less peaceful. Grandpa called me in the afternoon while I was doing homework. The second I saw his name on the screen, I knew exactly what he wanted. I answered, mostly because ignoring him would only make things worse later. He didn't waste time with small talk. He went straight into his rehearsed tone of disappointment, the one that sounds like a mix of fake sadness and authority. He told me that families are supposed to make things right, that I hurt my mother's feelings, and that I needed to apologize like a good granddaughter. I listened for a while, trying to keep my voice even, but then I said flatly that if he kept dumping his kids at our house, I was going to start charging $15 an hour like any regular babysitter. I told him I was done being free labor. He paused for a second, probably stunned that I had the nerve to say it. Then he laughed that condescending grandparent laugh, the one that means you're just a kid. You'll cave eventually. He said, "You're joking, right?" And I told him, "No, I'm not." He changed the subject after that, but I could tell he didn't take me seriously. That was fine. I had decided a long time ago that if I wanted people to treat me with respect, I had to stop backing down just to keep the peace. The next day, which was yesterday, my mom still hadn't spoken to me beyond a few glares and a dramatic sigh when I poured myself cereal too loudly. I was getting ready for my evening shift when I heard the unmistakable sound of little feet running down the hallway. My stomach sank. I walked into the living room and there they were, Kyle and Tyler, backpacks half unzipped, shoes still on, climbing onto the couch like they owned the place. My grandfather was standing near the doorway, smiling that polite but pushy smile he always wears when he knows he's crossing a boundary. He said something about just needing an hour to take care of a few things. I stood there in silence, arms crossed, staring at him long enough that he started to shift uncomfortably. I asked, "An hour?" And he said, "Yes, just an hour," with that same patronizing tone like I was 5. Before I could respond, he said he'd be right back and practically bolted for the door. I watched him drive away. And it hit me that he genuinely thought I'd just roll over and take it again. So I did exactly what I said I would. I grabbed my phone, opened Venmo, and sent him a payment request for $30, $15 per hour for 2 hours minimum, because even if he said just an hour, I knew better. I added a short note that said babysitting rate smiley face, and hit send. Then I went to check on the boys. They were surprisingly calm that day, probably because the last learning day still haunted them. I gave them snacks, set up a movie, and let them entertain themselves while I cleaned my desk and organized my school stuff. It was peaceful, efficient, and completely manageable. The best part? No one yelled. No one complained. I was in control and it felt good. An hour turned into 2, then 3. By the time my grandfather came back, I had already clocked out in my mind. He thanked me quickly, said something about being grateful, and hurried the boys into his car. I didn't say a word, just waved from the porch. I checked my phone later that evening, and saw that he hadn't responded to my Venmo request. No message, no call, nothing. I figured he was ignoring it to make a point. But then around 9 that night, while I was in bed scrolling through my feed, I got a notification. $30 received from Robert. For a solid minute I just stared at it. I couldn't help but laugh. It was a small victory, but it was mine. For years my mom and her family had treated my time like it was free. Like I existed purely to make their lives easier. And now for the first time I had made it clear that my effort had value. I wasn't just the built-in babysitter anymore. I was a person with boundaries and a price tag to match. Guess I found my rate. It did not take long for the news to travel through the family grapevine. My mom's side of the family thrives on gossip the way plants thrive on sunlight. One person says something at dinner, and within 24 hours everyone has an opinion. Apparently, my decision to charge Grandpa for babysitting was the most exciting drama they had had all month. It started with my aunt calling my mom to check in and see how she was holding up. Translation. She wanted the full story. By the next day, my cousin texted me saying she heard I invoiced Grandpa like a contractor, which honestly was not far from the truth. The reactions were as predictable as they were ridiculous. Half of the family acted like I had committed some kind of moral crime, saying things like, "She's forgotten her manners," and "You don't charge family." The other half, mostly the cousins who have also been volunteered as unpaid babysitters, thought it was about time someone stood up to him. It was strange to realize how divided everyone was over something that should have been common sense. I was not trying to start a family feud. I just wanted to stop being taken advantage of. Mom avoided the subject for a while, though I could tell it was eating at her. She would come into the kitchen, see me, and then suddenly remember something important she had to do in another room. She started texting instead of talking, leaving notes on the counter instead of asking me directly. It was almost comical, like we were co-workers communicating through passive-aggressive emails. Then one evening, Rick caught me on my way out to work and said quietly that he supported me. He looked around like he was sharing a state secret, then said, "Don't tell your mom I said that." He slipped me some gas money for my next shift and told me not to let them guilt me into being free childcare. For a second I just stood there, stunned. The irony hit me hard. Rick, the one person in this entire situation who wasn't even related to me by blood, was the only one acting like an adult. He didn't try to lecture me, didn't make it about family loyalty or guilt. He just treated me like a person who had a right to her own time. It was such a simple gesture, but it meant more than I could admit out loud. Meanwhile, Grandpa went silent. No calls. No texts. No boys showing up at the door with their shoes on the wrong feet and their snacks half-eaten. The house was eerily calm that weekend, and I didn't realize how tense I had been until the silence settled in. I actually had time to study, hang out with Megan, and do normal 17-year-old things without the background noise of crying kids and chaos. Then I found out the twist from my aunt, who always pretends she is neutral, but somehow knows everything. She mentioned casually that Grandpa had hired a babysitter from the neighborhood. Apparently, she is a college student who charges $20 an hour, and according to my aunt, she doesn't fold laundry or organize the pantry either. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my phone. The man who had lectured me about family helping family was now paying someone even more than what I asked for. The hypocrisy was so thick you could spread it on toast. I was content to let things stay quiet after that. I figured Mom would come around eventually, or at least get tired of pretending I didn't exist. But then a few nights ago, everything changed. I had just gotten home from work when Mom asked me to sit down. It was the first time in over a week that she had spoken to me in a normal tone. The tension in the air was so thick it could have been cut with a butter knife. She started off slowly, saying she had been thinking about everything that happened. She admitted she didn't realize how much she had been leaning on me. The words sounded careful, like she had practiced them beforehand. Then she said something I never thought I would hear from her, that she had been taking advantage of me. She actually used those exact words. For a moment, I almost didn't know how to respond. My mom has never been the type to admit when she's wrong. Felt like a small miracle. But of course the apology came with a caveat. She added that I didn't have to humiliate her in front of Dad. That part stung. I told her calmly that it wasn't humiliation, it was honesty. I explained that if the truth made her uncomfortable, then maybe that said more about the situation than it did about me. I also told her that once I move out for college, she will have to figure out childcare without me. I said it gently but firmly enough that she knew I meant it. She sat there quietly after that, staring at the floor like she was thinking it over. For once, she didn't argue or try to guilt-trip me. It was strange to see her that subdued. Later that night, as I was heading to my room, I heard her on the phone with Grandpa. She said, "Maybe Olivia was right." Stopped me in my tracks. Hearing her say that out loud felt like a small earthquake in our household. I didn't expect her to suddenly become self-aware, but that sentence alone felt like a step toward peace. This morning, I woke up to something unexpected. There was an envelope sitting on my desk, neatly labeled in my mom's handwriting. Inside was $50 in cash and a note that simply said, "For your help last weekend." No explanation, no emotional message, no attempt to reopen the argument. Just money, acknowledgement, and quiet understanding. I stood there for a long time staring at that envelope. It wasn't about the cash, it was about what it represented. For once, my mom had recognized that my time and effort had value. It felt like something had shifted between us. Something small but important. It wasn't perfect, and it didn't magically erase years of frustration, but it was a start. I guess I taught her the lesson after all. If you want someone to respect your time, you have to show them what it's worth.